Yeah, Nicole's there as well. Okay, we have all of council here, so if you could start the live stream, we'll start the meeting.
We're live.
All right, thank you. All right, council, I would like to call this regular council meeting of April 27th, 2021 to order, asking for an adoption of the agenda. Someone could make that motion, please. Councillor Charlotte, seconded by Councillor Elliott. All in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. Moving on to adoption of the regular council minutes of April 13th. If someone want to make that motion, please. Motion by Councillor Charlotte, seconded by Councillor Brooks Hill. All in favor? Motion's carried. Any business arising from those minutes? Councillor Palmer.
Thank you, Mayor Sulz. Just a question, and then I might have a comment. We received some correspondence regarding the development variance permit. Sorry, just getting on 4th Street, and I was just wondering if I think you were going to check into those comments. I just wonder if we received anything.
So I'll ask on development services if we received any further comments on that development. I'm sorry, I didn't get any indication that there was anything further.
Okay, so
Mr. Simon, do you have a comment?
To your worship, no, I don't have any comments on that. I haven't received anything. I would have to inquire as to which development variance permit this was for. Again, the one on 4th Street. I believe that was DVP 2020-17.
Okay, so Mayor Sulz, I'll just make a statement. There was some concern by the resident on 4th Street that was emailed to all of council about some of the maybe some of the information on that. And I was the most vocal person there, so I would just like to acknowledge that this information, if it was that we received, if it was accurate, it may or may not have changed my position. Certainly would have changed if it's accurate. Would have changed the strength that I made my arguments on that particular item. So that's my only comment there regarding that resident, and I'm not sure if we've got back to him or not.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate your comment. Thank you. Anything further? Any other business arising from the minutes? Seeing none, I'm going to now move on to item number 5. We have a presentation for development variance permit 2021-002, 1715 Nichol Road. Mr. Simon, you have a presentation?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Your Worship. So as always, if there's any issues in seeing the screen, please stop me. Other than that, we will jump right into this. So development variance permit 2021-002 is an application to allow an increase in the maximum height for phases 2 and 3 of the Mackenzie Village project. So on the board, you will see the staff recommendation. Staff are in support of this variance, and we will get into some details to let you know why we are in support of this particular variance. So brief overview, we will start with details on the property as well as the public notification that was done for this, because it is a development variance permit, and under the legislation, we are required to send out notifications. We will get into the details of the proposal and conclude with the staff evaluation and reiterate the staff recommendation. So the subject property is located at 1750 Nichol Road at the junction of Nels Crescent and Nichol Road. It is zoned comprehensive development zone 17, which does set the stage for both multifamily residential as well as mixed use development. So you can see on the map here, it is surrounded by a multitude of uses, residential to the north and the east, predominantly single family, multifamily residential being phase 1 of the Mackenzie Village project to the west, and commercial development immediately south on the other side of Nichol Road. Just a brief overview, which was provided for you in the agenda package through the staff report. Some history on phase 2 and 3 of the Mackenzie Village projects. In August of 2019, Council approved modifications to the Master Development Agreement, which guides development for the Mackenzie Village project, which included changes to the layout to accommodate road alignment and other minor changes to ensure consistency between the MDA and the CD zone. In September of 2019, Council approved a development permit for form and character for phases 2 and 3. In November of 2019, Council approved a variance permit to vary setback and minimum parking requirements for phases 2 and 3. And in May 2020, most recently, Council had approved amendments to the issued development permit to actually allow for the security to be provided at subdivision or building permit stage. So again, because this is a variance application that is seeking to vary one of the regulations of the zoning bylaw, staff are required to send out notifications. Proposal was sent out to 198 property owners within a 100-meter radius of the subject lands. 2 letters in support of the variance were received. So getting into some details of the proposal now. So the variance does seek to allow for a height increase specifically from 13.5 to 14.5 meters for phases 2 and 3. So the buildings that this actually applies to is all of the mixed use buildings that are included in phases 2 and 3. So that includes 3 of the 4 buildings. You can see here building number 1 is not subject to the height variance. That would be the most easterly building as part of phase 2. Building number 2 is a mixed use building, and this would be part of the variance application. And then as part of phase 3, buildings number 3 and buildings number 4, being more towards the western boundary of phase 2 and 3 lands, are both also seeking a variance for the maximum height. So in evaluating this application, one of the key components of a height variance, in addition to understanding the rationale that is requiring it, is understanding the impact of shadow casting. So shadow casting analysis was provided for this application. It does show the largest impact being from building 4. So again, that's the most western building as part of phase 3. You can see it's immediately adjacent to phase 1 of Mackenzie Village. And the most prominent impact would be in the morning of September as the sun is rising, going over. Building number 4 will impact the balconies due to the design of phase 1, but in part these are already shaded because they are all covered with canopy. Building 4 is approximately 29 meters away from phase 1 and is separated by a roadway, being Nels Nelson, which does further mitigate the impact of the shadow casting. Shadow casting really is more prominent to the north of the development, and it is mitigated. You can see from the roadway diagram here, there could be some impact to future phases 4 and 5, but it is further mitigated because there is sufficient separation by that road D. So when we're looking at properties that are kind of outside the scale of the Mackenzie Village development, one of the ones that comes to mind is the property that's located immediately east, which would be, again, adjacent to phase 2 here. That building is about 35 meters away. It's developed with a current residence. And again, the building number 1 that's in proximity to that property is not requesting a height variance. So that one would only be built at 13.5 meters. However, nonetheless, there was still no impact identified from the shadow casting analysis. So the commercial property to the south as well is located about 50 meters away and is separated by Nichol Road. So again, there was no impact associated with the height variance from a shadow casting perspective for those existing buildings. So getting into some more details in terms of the justification that was provided with the application as to why this is required. Variance is required to increase the thickness of the structural floors to meet Revelstoke snow loads, specifically between the commercial and the residential units. So the ground floor and then floor number 2, where there needs to be separation between those 2 uses. And in addition, at the roof level as well, the developer is seeking to increase the thickness of that as well to provide further insulation that is beyond the minimum requirements of the BC Building Code in an effort to produce a higher quality product that is a higher performance build. Without the increase in height to meet the required thickness of the floors, 4 stories would not be achievable in a manner to comply with BC Building Code requirements. Development Services staff have reviewed this with the city's senior building official, and those comments were provided in the report for you. The provisions of the CD zone do allow for a bonus fourth story when underground parking is proposed, which it is with phases 2 and 3, which council would have seen with the original form and character development permit. So to conclude, staff are supportive of the variance for the following reasons. The impacts from shadow casting on existing buildings, specifically from building number 4, are minimal and are really more prominent just for 1 month out of the year. The increase in height is required to allow for a 4-story building to comply with BC building code requirements, achieves enhanced building efficiency, and does allow for underground parking, and staff are supportive of that bonus 4th story for this development. There's only minimal impact to the existing eastern buildings and phase 1 of the Mackenzie Village project, as shown in the shadow casting analysis. And the existing eastern buildings are also impacted by that roof canopy, remember, so there already is some shading that's provided for them. And there are no other buildings in proximity to the development that would be impacted by this height variance request. Therefore, staff are supportive of the variance, and the recommended resolution for council is on the screen for you. Thank you. This concludes the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Simon. All right, council, if we can get someone to put the motion on the table, and then we can have a discussion. Someone want to move that for me, please? Councillor Palmer?
Yeah, I'll make the motion as provided on the screen.
Right. Is there a seconder for the motion, please? Councillor Elliott? Okay. Councillors, any questions of Mr. Simon regarding this presentation and the variance permit? Councillor Elliott?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just have a question on the bonus 4th floor. What, how does that originate? Was the original design for 3 stories, and we decided to go underground, so we allow them to go 4? Is that the thinking?
Mr. Simon, Ms. Wade?
Through the chair, it has to do with the provisions of the comprehensive development zone, which if underground parking is provided, which is an amenity for development, then that entitles the developer to construct a bonus 4th story. So in this particular case, underground parking is provided for. They've realized when they've gotten to their detailed designs that a variance is needed for height to achieve that 4th story, and hence why this is before council today.
So may I continue?
Yes, please.
Just on the CD zone requirements, those are created when you originate the CD particular, you know, they're subject to the, basically we create them, the regulations that apply to each CD zone.
Through your worship, the process to craft a CD zone is between the developer to suit their development project and staff that is ultimately brought before council for consideration and adoption. And this one, I believe, was provided for back in 2017, if memory serves me correctly.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any further comments, councillors? I think in the way the presentation is with the new concrete or the thickness of the concrete between the floors and the way it's moving forward, and the fact that the shadow casting has been done to see what's going to apply to neighboring properties, and it appears fine. I'm supportive of this. Councillor Charlotte.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. I'm also supportive of this. It seems to make sense. Just to clarify, though, I believe this is the only phase that includes commercial space in the development. So the height requirement, if part of it is because of that division between commercial and residential, would we expect to see height variances in future phases of the development, or do we know that yet?
Mr. Simon?
Through your worship, that is correct. It does have to do with the commercial nature of this, which is just for phases 2 and 3. Staff would not expect to see a variance request. Again, when the CD zones are drafted, it's in consultation, obviously, with the developer. So we would hope that it suits their development needs in the future.
Okay. Any other comments or questions, councillors? Councillor Palmer?
Thank you, Mayor Sulz. I'm also in support of the variance. It's a fairly minor thing and makes sense, and especially with the motivation to add quality and including insulation factors. I think that is good. I think the more important thing about this development is it's been controversial over the years. It's been a long-term time coming. I think we should be very excited to have more housing. I know there's varying opinions as to what's needed, but this is coming from the private sector in developing much needed housing in our community. And I think it's something to celebrate, to be starting to alleviate some of those problems. Thank you, Mayor Sulz.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Palmer. Appreciate your comments. Any further comments, councillors? Seeing none, I'm going to ask the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Simon. Moving on to announcements from the mayor, just a couple of announcements today. We're nearing the end of the month, and our vaccination program for the community specific, is continuing until the end of the day on the 30th. So just encourage those of you who haven't had a chance to get an appointment, if you can book an appointment to get your vaccination, just encourage that. There will be ongoing vaccinations after through the public health system, albeit it's going to be on a downgraded basis as far as numbers go. So just encourage people with that. Also, liquid waste management has been, the engagement has been carried on until the end of the month as well. So if people would like to go on to talkrevelstoke.ca and make some input as to the management plan for our liquid waste, you're more than welcome to still do that, and just encourage people to get involved in whatever capacity they can. Thank you. Moving on, we now have a delegation. So we have Cheryl Peters and Alec Warrender here regarding BC Housing Update, and there is a package or a presentation in your package. I believe that Cheryl and Alec are just going to speak to that today. So Cheryl, Alec, if you want to take that away, please.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Councilpersons. My name is Cheryl Peters. I recognize that I'm probably a new face to all of you. You've probably been more familiar with some of my other BC Housing colleagues, namely Dana Locke and John Purdy, both of which who are either retired or about to retire. So suffice it to say, this project has been moved into my portfolio. I am the Provincial Director of Redevelopment, and I look after all provincially owned lands that are open for new density possibilities. So before I jump in, I'd like to just acknowledge and thank you all for allowing me to participate over this online forum in this very different age that we find ourselves in. And I'd like to acknowledge that I come to you from the traditional territory of the Coquitlam First Nations persons. So you guys have been familiar with this project since early 2020, and we've gone through what we like to call our open and voluntary engagement process in efforts to really understand what the community is looking for to form up our ideas and thoughts about the site. It informs our feasibility, informs our pro forma. We finished that process off, and our consultants, Alec Warrender's here. He's going to be talking a little bit more about some of the findings of that public engagement process. We do know that we'll be concentrating on affordable rental housing, and as we progress to submitting our application in the next couple of weeks for a formal rezoning through Marianne's office and the planning office, I hope to work with the planning department to target the renters that we might be looking for. We know we're looking at families. I'd like to have discussions around workforce housing. And on that note, maybe I could talk to, allow Alec to take it over and talk about the findings and how we're actually started directing the project in relation to some of the things that we heard. Alec?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Cheryl. I'll just give a quick overview of the process. I know that, Your Worship, you probably paid attention as we made progress. Like Cheryl said, we started in February of 2020. We kind of thought that the process would run a bit quicker, but COVID did throw a bit of a wrench in how we were able to deliver it. The first session we were able to do in person, which was great. That was February 27th. And the main objective there, we didn't really show any concepts. It was just to get feedback from the community to better understand the site's opportunities and constraints. We took that feedback away. Literally, we didn't get into, heights, types of units. It was mostly just to kind of learn from the community. The second engagement session we held on January 10, 2020. June 10, 2020. In that, we did show concepts. We developed what we call the low density and a medium density and a high density concept. One of the images we'd shown, you have in front of you there, that's a cross section, and it mostly just came down to height profile and unit types. Each concept had a mix of townhomes and a mix of apartments. We just gained a bit of extra height and density. We added more apartment units and height. I'd say session 2 was really interesting because it did show us that there was an appetite for higher density units. Some of the stats you have there in the text box kind of reinforce what we knew was the case, was that there is a desire for a variety of different types of housing uses here. So I'll just run through those key considerations quickly. 73% of the respondents preferred the higher density concepts. So option 1, we kind of developed it as though it was your R4 zone. So that was one of your higher density residential zones, which is kind of a lower density zone in the grand scheme of things. And there was, I think 30% of people liked that one, and 73% preferred either a split between option 2 and 3. And they were pretty equal, to be honest. Option 3, which was the highest density one, I believe won out by 1 percentage point or so. This wasn't all about height and density. We got into open space. We got into things like a commercial component. This is in a village center. I think there is an expectation that it'll have commercial, whether that's retail or daycare. Those details are still to be worked out a little bit still. But we did test that, and there was definitely support from the community for including a commercial component and daycare. The community honed in on that, maybe a little bit from suggestion from us, but it did seem as though that was something that everyone thought went really well with the project. So we took away the feedback we got from that second session, and we came back in September 30th, 2020 with the final engagement session where we fleshed out one concept. And this was the strategy from the very start. We kind of delivered it as we communicated to people. We would, over time, develop it further and further. This one, we got a little more aggressive and tested what that attitude would be for 5 stories, and we feel like we did hit a wall there for sure. That said, let me just flip the page. This time we did throw out unit counts a bit more. 174 units is what we feel represents a nice mix of studio, 2 and 3 bedroom units on site. The exact mix and breakdown will get fleshed out over time, but that's just sort of where we landed for now. People seem to be quite happy with that number. 60% of respondents preferred that or more. And then 40% preferred a 3-story height profile, and 60% preferred 4 stories or higher. And the level of support dropped off as we got higher. So all we really wanted to do was test that, and what it came back is that people were uncomfortable going above 4 stories, which I think heard loud and clear. Honestly, like Cheryl said, these just really provided us a good opportunity to get a sense of what people were willing to do. We'll obviously get a much better sense of that once the land use application comes in. We're targeting on doing that at some point in May. There's a bit of a summary here just on sort of the key points that we took away and how we're going to use those to frame our final submission. Thanks, Your Worship.
Alex, appreciate that. Looking forward to the project getting started and ultimately coming to fruition. I know there's a bit of steps to go through first, but nice to see these renditions and that sort of thing coming out, and public being able to actually engage with you on this sort of stuff. Councillors, any comments or questions for Alec or Cheryl? Councillor Charlotte, then Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Worship. Yeah, just saying thank you very much. It's great to see this come forward in a steady process, especially the breakdown of the engagement process and how the concept developed from there. And I just wanted to point out that, yeah, I agree. I appreciate that you were able to find that upper ceiling rather than just more. How much is too much? So really dialing that in and being able to be responsive to the community's desires for this, I think it's going to be a great addition to our mix. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Elliott.
Yes, Your Worship. I mean, it's great that we're finally making some movement on density housing. That's an exciting path we're going down. So it's wonderful to get that. The comments, however, I've received or concerns are going to be the like 174 units in a busy area already. I guess traffic studies are going to be a key part of the development process and the application process. Have you had any preliminary work done on that?
Alec.
Worship, yes, we have. That was one of the key components as we developed it and tried to better understand the opportunities and constraints. And we had WSP, who's a large engineering firm. We had landscape architecture from them, and we had civil engineer and transportation engineer engaged, and they studied each of the concepts. And we have been having dialogue with Mr. Black and Marianne at the city for sure, and we've studied it, and we'll be submitting reports in support of the submission when we do come forward. Mm-hmm. And of course, as always, there's recommendations in there on how you can help mitigate traffic, and part of that's behavioral changes and how communities develop over time as they gain more density, and part of it is you know, a few upgrades that we'll be doing obviously along the property frontages.
And just maybe, sorry, carry on, Gary?
Yes, please.
Yeah. Is 174 units, okay, are there more? Or should we expect more? Does that utilize all the land that's available there?
Your Worship, you know, when you're landing on a unit count at this stage is always tricky, and that's why we try not to promise that number of units, because we just really don't know. And a lot of it depends on how it gets built out. There's a certain amount of floor area that will get capped, and we've assigned a breakdown of that based on what BC Housing likes to see from a unit mix. So there are studios, there are 1 bedrooms, there are 2 bedrooms, there are 3 bedrooms. But if all of a sudden we target more families, maybe there'll be fewer units because they're larger. Or if we hear that after the second phase, we really need workforce housing, there may be a few more units because those tend to be a little bit smaller. So it'll be something that gets massaged over time for sure, but that's kind of the number we land on when we produce what we consider to be a healthy unit mix.
Councillor Elliott?
Yeah, thank you, Gary. Just one more element that's missing in our town is seniors. A lot of seniors are in bigger homes and are looking for something to downsize to. Is that a consideration for the future?
Alec, I could take that one. It's Cheryl here, Councillor Elliott. Yes, senior. We can look at seniors. We do have a we have a robust push for accessibility as well. We want to make sure that we're servicing our persons with disabilities and challenges, whether they be physical or otherwise, throughout our housing product. So, I mean, I'd be looking at the full gamut, knowing that the need within your community is quite varied, and any complementary kind of housing, I would like to try to group them together. Alec talked about a little bit about some of the intentionality around a daycare. Most of the redevelopment sites in my portfolio, which is all the provincially owned assets across the province, I am accounting for daycare. We're hearing the cry. We're trying to create partnerships with other agencies to support a daycare use in conjunction with a large residential development, knowing that we'll have a family component there. And if it's not the need for that immediate development, the neighborhood will need it as well. So we're looking for any kind of complementary. I think when it comes to the unit counts, just to go back to your previous question, Councillor, I want to keep it a little bit loose because I want to keep some space to discuss some of the specific needs that your planning department has in mind with your housing strategy, and to make sure that that's catered correctly. At some level, there's going to be a time where I need to nail the plate, and the plate can't change. But for now, it's still pretty open, and we're willing to have that discussion, and we're open to it. Another piece of the issue is a bit of our cash flow and accounting that I need to do, not of your worry, totally of mine. And then sorting out phasing, which building comes first, and how we're actually going to construct it.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Cheryl. I appreciate that. Anything further, councillors? Councillor Palmer.
Thank you, Mayor Sulz. I'll try and keep it brief. There are a couple things. One, just on the on the unit, there's bulk massing, and you heard from the community that they don't want to go high. But I guess personally, I'm in favor of height if we can get rid of bulk massing, and we talked about shadow casting earlier in the meeting. And so if we were going up, 6 or 7 stories, but creating more livable space, green space in between buildings. So these are more sort of concepts, just where I'm coming from on all development. These renditions always look nice, but there is a lot of bulk massing there, and so that's one comment. Very exciting to have needed housing. And I think it's very important to have non-market housing that we're helping facilitate that. However, I think it also is indicative of a failure of creating the market to create housing rather than government to make housing. So that's just sort of kind of a general statement. Where is that balance? I think one of the things I'm disappointed at a little bit is recently the province has acquired other housing that's been taken off the market for a couple of years. And so, there's a bit of a irony there. I don't know if there's any comment about that, the bulk massing as opposed to having more green space that you see in, modern cities nowadays. If there's any comment, maybe this isn't the place possibly.
Councillor Palmer, I can shed a little bit of insight into that. And we're cognizant of building technologies and what might be availed to us under the code, as well as design opportunities. And what we found is wood frame is still exponentially less expensive, less costly than concrete. And concrete starts being mandated at 6 stories and over. So, and when we have higher construction costs, it actually gets driven down to our ability to rent out at an affordable rate, right? So we were looking at what we can build the fastest with the most agility and the most cost effective. And today, given the heightened feedback on the design side and given some of our code constraints, it's still wood frame. When we think about mass timber, which is a third technology, which is really big right now in the interior, I know there's a number of manufacturers that's really big about that. The technology itself, as far as industry, as far as trades and sub-trades being able to install that product is still on a steep learning curve. The cost to implement is actually more expensive today than it is even concrete. The anticipation is it will come down and will be a true viable product to build. It's a green technology. It has embodied carbon. It ticks all the boxes for really good building, but it's just not an option for us today. So we're still looking at wood frame.
Thank you, through the chair. Thank you for that, Cheryl, because I think that's kind of what I'm looking at. And, when we're looking at, both using wood products, but also how we're creating carbon capture. And I do see what's happening in the interior. So there's those 6-story wood frame constructions, beautiful buildings, patios on the top. And then also the constraint of the footprint. So they're having more desirable space and possibly public space in those areas. And so maybe it won't be for this one, but I think it's stuff that we need to be thinking to the future. Thanks, Mayor Sulz.
Thank you. Councillor Elliott, did you have another comment or question?
Yes, Your Worship. Just on the price or cost to rent these facilities, you mentioned it's not affordable housing. Is market rate, or what's the intent?
It'll be non-market, affordable, purpose-built rental. That was a mouthful. Okay, so it's purpose-built rental on what we call the left side of the housing continuum. We're looking at affordable market, so it'll be a range between 65% of market to just under market. There is a program called the Housing Hub program, and there may be an opportunity for purpose-built market, but what we call low end of market, meaning it is income tested and it's market product, but it is not open-ended market as far as rents. So our benchmark is market. The majority, if not all of it, will be under market, depending on how some of the pro forma that we're still working on peters out. And there may be some Housing Hub product that is in it as well. But it will all be rental, sir.
Yeah, and I know we have a affordable housing society, and they're struggling to find a rate that makes sense. What I mean, what's the difference between BC Housing and the Affordable Society that we have?
You mean it's finding it affordable?
Yeah.
Well, quite frankly, you're right. We share the same struggle in finding a reasonable rent for the community, and the community housing sector within Revelstoke is a group that we'll be actually conferring with to find comparable rates. I don't want to compete. I'm here to complement, right? Rental product or rental inventory. But I think the difference would be that when BC Housing, when we call it directly delivered, directly managed, or it's our own property that we develop. It's not necessarily a nonprofit that develops it for us. There are some economies of scale that we can also provide. We have yet to determine whether every building will be directly managed by BC Housing. It may be in a situation where I partner, and I'd have to go out for competition to determine, but I may partner with a nonprofit housing society within Revelstoke, where they would provide the services. We would just provide the building, and they could operate it that way. But again, I'd be working with the sector to determine a viable rent.
Right. May I continue, Gary?
Yes. Yes.
I know that, you know, the unit that's already been revamped down on Front Street, and the rent that's there now is not, you know, I think the expectations were off. You know, the intent was that we're going to develop these places that were run down and bring them back up to a standard that's acceptable, and somehow make it affordable. But I don't know if it is affordable. I think it's a high, you know, maybe the market has gone so crazy that I can't really grasp it, but it doesn't strike me as a low income facility.
We do tend to group, and you'll hear this in, it's kind of been our business case model for the last number of years, is rent mixing, where you have some low and you have some moderate, and we mix that to make something viable. And inevitably, you know, provincial government needs to kick in additional equity because the rents are not high enough to cover full cost or for full mortgage or debt service, right? Yeah. So they're not, but the key to the puzzle is to try to keep the taxpayer equity push as small as possible while still meeting that affordable rental need. So that's still some of the Rubik's Cube puzzling that we're still doing on the math side, but we needed to determine what the appetite was for massing and form to determine some of the financials.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Palmer.
Thank you, Mayor Sulz. So just on the market versus non-market housing, was there any consideration, and I doubt it's happening for this, but having going into partnerships where there's actually components of market housing in the mix? Yeah, because I think you've explained, you know, some of the complexity, the taxpayer subsidy, and there's this bit of a contradiction as we take taxpayer money for subsidized housing that makes life less affordable. So there's a bit of a cycle there. But I guess I'm just more for my education is on the market. Is that conversation happening at all at the province, or even a consideration for something like this?
Good question. Common question for a lot of our redevelopment sites, especially as, you know, you've seen BC Housing do some land deals in the last, say, 2 decades or so. So in short, the disposition of land to private entities, no. BC Housing has full intention, or the Provincial Rental Housing Corporation, our landholding entity, has full intentions to hold the land in perpetuity. We may have a long-term lease provision where we may partner with a housing provider, but the intention today is not to go into partnership with a private developer.
Thank you.
Any further? Thank you. Any further comments, councillors? Seeing none, thank you, Cheryl and Alec. Appreciate you coming today and giving some input as to what's going to be happening on Downie Street. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Council, we're going to move on to item 8A, Development Services, OCP Engagement Strategy. So there is a motion on the table if somebody would want to put that on for me, and then we can have a brief discussion. Councillor Brooks-Hill.
that the official community plan engagement strategy dated March 2021 be supported.
Seconder for the motion, please. Councillor Elliott. Discussion on the motion. Councillors, we discussed this at Committee of the Whole, but is there any questions or concerns that you would like to bring forward? Ms. Wade is here if you have some questions. Seeing none, I'm happy to see this come forward, and exciting to see some more strategy with our engagement and dealing with the OCP. I'm happy with that. Okay, Council, I'm going to ask the question. All those in favor? Opposed? You're in favor, Councillor Palmer? Yes. Okay. It's unanimous. Thank you. Thank you, Council. Appreciate that. We're going to move on now to item 9A, single-use item regulation bylaw, to be read a first time. So, Ms. Floyd, do we want to say anything about this, or should we read the bylaw and then we'll ask questions?
Well, I can give you a brief overview. So this bylaw has been a long time coming. In April 2019, in my report, thank you, Councillor Charlotte, she clarified that there was a resolution from the Environmental Advisory Committee, and that was to bring a bylaw forward for council consideration. However, the City of Victoria bylaw was challenged in the Supreme Court through the BC Court of Appeal, and it overturned the decision to make that bylaw valid. So council decided to put moving forward on hold. And then in March of this year, some councillors had been asking where this bylaw was at. So I attended a webinar put on by the province entitled Enabling Municipal Single-Use Plastics Bylaw Authority, which basically gave an overview on what the province was doing, what the feds were doing, and where we could go move forward. So this bylaw is in front of you for first reading for a number of reasons. Some of the other ones have gone for first and second, and then to the minister. But I think that in light of a minister's regulation coming forward, which would allow the city not to put a bylaw to the province for consideration prior to adoption, I think there's some room for changes or improvements. And then of the 9 bylaws in BC that have been adopted already, only 3 of them took on all single-use plastic items, including straws and to-go containers. I'm not sure where council wants to go with that. If you just want to do the single-use shopping bags, we can certainly amend the bylaw to move forward. So before council adopts this bylaw, it will have to go to the province at this point. If we hold off a little longer, then we could eliminate that step, but we don't know when that regulation is going to be put forward. So there is a potential schedule of events in the council report. It's quite vague, but I did reach out to Stacy at the Chamber of Commerce, who provided some very high overview comments, which included she thought that the timing might not be the best for businesses during this time of COVID. There could be an additional administrative, operational, or financial burden. And then I also believe that I think we really need to beef up the engagement process so that not only the businesses, but the public also know where we're going with this. So I guess at this point, council could choose to amend the bylaw, reduce the scope to only single-use plastic checkout bags, or amend the schedule of events, or proceed as stated in the report.
So if we put this motion on the table now, are we going to be hamstringing ourselves as we move forward? I think if we do this for the first reading, that still gives us the opportunity to amend and to move things around as far as adding and taking away as we move forward. That way we're not forcing anything during COVID time. Am I correct on that, Ms. Floyd?
Yes, you're correct.
Okay. All right, Councillor Charlotte, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, we had our Environmental Advisory Committee meeting just recently, and we were talking about the compost and waste management at the landfill. And one of the topics that had come up was the limitations of compost in a landfill, because a landfill is not designed to compost. And I think that the single-use bylaw fits in with that conversation as we get ready to process compost and organic waste in our community. Is what does that look like for those compostable containers that are a popular alternative? Because it was pointed out they're not great in the landfill either, because we don't want them composting there. I think I agree with Cindy. I think a robust engagement process with the public to potentially roll this in as part of that waste management conversation is, what does our community want? What are we willing to pay for? And how are we going to make that happen? I'm curious as to if this goes forward for being read a first time, just to get this ball rolling. I think we've been, we don't need to rush things, I guess, but I do think it's important to make a statement and get this rolling. What you said, the timeline's in here, but that the Chamber of Commerce was concerned about the impact on business, and I can understand that. So this would have implementation.
I guess
not. Yeah.
Sorry, Councillor Charlotte. It kind of depends on the public input, what businesses want, what council wants. If there's a lot of pushback, you might want to amend things further. I think we really need to work with the business community to get this. Yeah.
I agree, especially with the pandemic impact. Thank you very much for bringing this forward. I think this is great.
So if we bring this we bring this motion on the table now, that gives us a chance to engage with the community as to what they think that they can afford, what they think that they can see, but it also sends a message that we definitely need to do something. Councillor Elliott, do you have any comments? I know that single-use plastics were something that you wanted to make sure that we got out of the landfill and that we were dealing with. So I'm just going to ask, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but do you have a comment that you would like to make?
I'm amazed it's taken 3 years, actually my term on council, to finally get this to a discussion point where we're making a motion. That's incredible. I think it's a big win. The whole thing is a symbolic gesture. The recycling plastic is such a small piece of the puzzle, but it's just a message to the community that we're chasing a green future. And that's where we win on this. This is not meant to solve the problem about plastics and paper, which is better, which is compostable or not. It's just sending a message to the community. Plastic isn't good, period. Let's do what we can to reduce it. I would say full blazes. Let's jump right in and be the leader on sustainability rather than just wait till it comes down from the higher echelon. So I think I'm all for it.
Okay. Councillor Palmer, you have your hand up, and then Councillor Brooks-Hill.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Sulz. I think in between the lines, I think I heard Councillor Elliott make the motion as presented in the report. Is that correct, Councillor Elliott? Because I'll second it if you are.
Yeah, someone needs to put it on the table.
Well, if you're looking for comments, I think we've given the public 6 months to adapt. I would reduce that to 3, and I would charge 25 cents a bag right now, right from the very get-go.
So through the chair, Councillor Elliott, are you making the motion? If not, I'll make it.
Go ahead, Councillor Elliott.
No, I'm not sure. Do we make the motion or the amended motion?
Let's go ahead, Councillor Palmer.
So, Your Worship, I'm not sure if the motion is right there in the report. If it is, I'll make that motion and seek a second so we can have something on the table to debate.
Yeah.
All right, good. So Councillor Palmer is moving that, seconded by Councillor Rind. Further discussion? Councillor Brooks-Hill. Okay, sorry, Councillor Palmer. Can I go to Councillor Brooks-Hill? He has his hand up, and then I'll come back to you.
On protocol, just make a quick, since I made the motion.
Sure.
So as Councillor Elliott mentioned, this is a kind of a window dressing thing. It's a poster child of doing the right thing. And so it's important in that respect, only if we get moving on overall sustainability with waste in our community, as Councillor Gillette mentioned. So I think those are really key things from Councillor Elliott and Councillor Gillette about the importance of moving ahead. Yeah, and so thank you, Mayor Sulz.
Good, thank you, Councillor Palmer. Councillor Brooks Hill.
Sorry, I gapped out a little bit, but I just wanted to say briefly, a few years ago when this first came, I was recused myself because of my involvement with the North Columbia Environmental Society. I'm no longer involved with them, and this is a bit of a different scenario, so I'm no longer recusing myself. But to go on, I agree with Councillor Elliott and to some degree with Councillor Palmer. I'm a little less clear what he's saying, but that I don't think this is going far enough. However, given the circumstances with COVID and the impacts in our business community, I really don't think now's the time to be rushing ahead and making big changes. A lot of these businesses are dealing with enough that I think going slowly is more prudent. And I think this is a good basis that we can add on to later. So, you know, getting this as the foundation, and then we can start, you know, banning other things having greater impact, so that there's more sustainability and less waste going into our landfill.
Okay, thank you for those comments. Any other comments, councillors, on the first reading? Councillor Elliott?
Yes, Your Worship. Just on the business input on this, I think prior to, I think it's been to this Chamber of Commerce twice, and in both instances they came back in favor of it. So they're well aware that this is coming. And I think most businesses are doing the best to reduce plastic anyway. But it's just, again, it's a message that we are charging into this. We're not waiting. We're just going to make a move and move ourselves toward a greener future. And I just can't emphasize enough. I think it's a story that people would feel positive about, instead of being this COVID fear and focusing on all the things we can't do. And the reality is, I don't think we're going to get out there and enforce it. No one's going to penalize a business for putting out plastic if they have to. It's just a message.
Great, thank you. Councillor Palmer.
Thank you, Mayor Sulz. I think we're all saying the same thing. We need to get moving on it to lesser or greater degrees, but this is a good first step. It's first reading, so there, as Ms. Floyd pointed out, this will create opportunity for more input, including from the chamber members in all businesses. If there is a real input, we'll hear, or a real impact that's creating some difficulty, we'll hear back regarding that. So I think this is a very, very important step. I would like to mention just one thing to the public. Don't stop using plastic bags and start using paper bags and putting those paper bags in the garbage. It creates leachate and it pollutes the groundwater. So just one little point there. It's not a utopia solution of going away from plastic. Thank you, Mayor Sulz.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Palmer. All right, any other comments? Seeing none, I'm going to ask the question. We're voting on single-use item regulation bylaw 2263 being read a first time. I'll now ask the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Passed unanimously. Thank you, Council. Appreciate that. And thank you for your diligence, Ms. Floyd, in getting this to this stage. Appreciate that. All right, we're going to move on to item B, Development Services, OCP Amendment Bylaw, Newlands Road, Willie-Jim Holdings. We have a presentation, Mr. Simon.
Thank you, Your Worship. Item 9B is an official community plan amendment and rezoning concurrent application. The application does seek to allow for comprehensive development that would consist of multifamily residential between 28 and 46 dwelling units. So starting off, just to give a brief summary of the staff recommendation, staff are in support of this OCP amendment and rezoning application. So the recommended resolution that is on the screen and in the council agenda package will recommend first and second reading, as well as directing staff to schedule a public hearing for the OCP amendment and rezoning application. And we'll get into some details now about why staff are supportive of it. So a brief summary, we'll start off with some background on the property. We will get into the proposal details, conclude with the staff evaluation, and reiterate the recommendation. So the subject lands are located at 1160 Newlands Road at the junction of Newlands Road and Elm Street, as shown in the map here. Subject property is zoned single-family residential district, and it is located in the Arrow Heights neighborhood. It is surrounded by residential parkland as well as institutional development. So this is the second phase of this entire project across from the hospital. So as shown in the phasing map here, so keep in mind the property is not subdivided yet. So the previous map that you saw, it is all currently one piece of property, but the overall development plan as shown here is in red, being phase 1, which would constitute 25 single-family R1 lots at approximately 550 square meters in size apiece. And this would be a project that is currently under construction through subdivision sub 2019-04. The application that is before council today for consideration specifically deals with phase 2 of this project. So phase 2 is what is referred to as the remainder parcel, and it would be for 28 to 46 multifamily units in the area that is highlighted in green. So with the subdivision for phase 1, it's currently underway. The applicant is working with staff to meet the requirements of their subdivision that would ultimately allow for it to be registered. And they are currently working their way at completing all the services associated with the project. That includes services that are approved through an executed works and services agreement. Prior to phase 1, the applicant did hold an open house to engage the community on this project. And they did complete a survey. The results of that open house did indicate that there was support for single family development on this parcel rather than multifamily. And we'll get into some details as to why multifamily is proposed. So the application that is actually before council today is to amend the OCP land use. So every single property in the city does have an identified OCP land use that does generally dictate what is appropriate for those lands. This property has the OCP land use of future growth, and the applicant has applied to amend that to the T4 walk-up residential land use. So in conjunction with that OCP amendment application, again, the applicant has applied to rezone the property. Again, it's the only phase 2 lands, as you saw in the previous map. So those lands are proposed to be rezoned from single-family residential district, being R1, to comprehensive development zone CD 21. So getting into some details about the site context. So the lands were heavily treed, and the developer did secure the services of a qualified environmental professional to guide harvesting that was undertaken on the lot as part of phase 1. As part of the review for that harvesting, the city did secure third-party review services of Cascade Environmental to ensure adherence to applicable legislation that is typically governed by the province. So for example, the Wildlife Act, to make sure that there was no impact on bird nesting in the area. In support of the proposal, the developer did complete the following: a comprehensive development concept, wildlife survey memo. Specifically, it was looking at impacts on game and turtles as well as raptor nesting, lighting calculation to demonstrate dark sky adherence for this proposal, geotechnical report to look at overall soil conditions and drainage conditions as well as roadway, water, and sanitary detailed design, which was ultimately secured with the city through a executed works and services agreement that was associated with phase 1. So when we're looking at the proposed development concept that was submitted for phase 2, it does include a mixture of housing types, duplexes and fourplexes predominantly on the outskirts of the development, with row houses being centrally located. You can see pedestrian access to the dwellings. They would be fronting onto Newlands, and they would all have rear access from the internal roadway. This is not only a requirement of the initial phase 1 subdivision, but also embedded through the provisions of the comprehensive development zone. Phase 2 does include between 28 and 46 total dwelling units. So this would be because on the outskirts, there is flexibility in whether or not a duplex or a fourplex could ultimately be pursued. So it could result in, on the low end, 16 duplexes being constructed. And keep in mind that 16 duplex units or 32 fourplex units. And then centrally located, again, a little bit of flexibility given the lot sizes that are proposed in the CD zone. We would be looking at somewhere between 12 and 14 row house units. So that's how we get our total of between 28 and 46 total dwellings. So when we look at, again, keeping in mind just the phase 2 lands, what could be developed under the current zoning at R1, you'd be looking at about 15 units for phase 2, which would equate to a density of about 18 units per hectare, which is very comparable to phase 1. And under the proposed CD zoning that would be implemented through this OCP amendment and rezoning application that is before council today, we'd be looking again between 28 and 46 units for phase 2, which equates to a density of between 33 and 56 units per hectare. So when we're looking at the specifics of the comprehensive development zone for this proposal, a lot of times there's questions as to why a CD zone is being proposed rather than the standard residential zone that is contained currently within the zoning bylaw. So there's a multitude of reasons as to why a CD zone is required to support this concept. It does allow for smaller lot sizes and widths than what's currently provided for in the zoning bylaw. It does include provisions for things like detached garages that are at the rear of the property that are connected by a party wall. Currently, the zoning bylaw does not include these provisions for what would ultimately be an accessory building. So you can think of it as that massing of detached garages at the rear of a property that share a common wall with their neighbor. The zoning bylaw doesn't currently have provisions for that. There's restrictions on attached garages as well that are embedded as part of the CD zone. So basically, if an attached garage is proposed with this development as part of a duplex, it would be limited to a single car garage as well as one tandem parking stall. And this is because, keep in mind, rear access is required for this development. So that ultimately requires ample green space to be maintained as part of this project. There's restrictions on the massing of those detached garages that we had referred to by requiring building articulation. And again, this is embedded in the specifics of the CD zone. And as well as the CD zone does not permit vacation rental uses. So this does allow a little bit more control that is in line with the OCP policies, specifically the Arrow Heights neighborhood policies. I know some of these provisions in the CD zone are a little technical, and is what staff would refer to as form-based regulations to make sure that there is continuity with this development project as it does proceed, should it be supported by council. So getting into some technical elements of the proposal, just really briefly high level, because it is an OCP amendment and rezoning application. We don't want to go too far down the road on this, but the developer is constructing an internal roadway. As you can see here, highlighted in red, it would provide access to both phase 1 and phase 2 lands. Extension of municipal water, sanitary, and drainage infrastructure is being completed through the executed works and services agreement for phase 1. So it will be a fully serviced development for both phases 1 and 2. And while further technical analysis would be required from the city's engineering department, the extension of the sanitary may allow for future connections in this area as well. So when we look at the overall pedestrian connections and open space provisions associated with this development, so this is in proximity. So on the western boundary of phase 1, there is existing parkland that is owned by the city. When we look at the development itself, the main provision that staff has worked with the applicant on is ensuring sufficient pedestrian access. So you can see from the map here, blue would be what we refer to as off-site pedestrian connections. Red would be the on-site pedestrian connections. So you can see there would be a sidewalk located on the south side of the internal roadway, a sidewalk along the property frontage of Elm Street, as well as on the north and south side of Newlands Road, to ultimately provide that full pedestrian access from the seniors facility, adjacently located to this development, as well as the hospital to the park. In addition, staff have worked with the applicant to have a north-south pedestrian connection that bisects the row house development to again promote a open community and to have further connections for the community, just to provide ample access to that parkway. So in summary, when staff are evaluating this application, there's obviously a multitude of policies in the OCP that we are evaluating it against. But to give council a summary of why staff are supportive of the OCP amendment and rezoning application, and we've provided it here. So the T4 walk-up residential land use is suitable based on the proposed density as well as development form of this development. The developer did undertake community engagement as indicated in the background section of this presentation. And while there was support for single family, the OCP future growth land use does identify infill development as suitable for this location. The higher density development does reduce the per capita impacts on the environment. Essentially, there's less land that's dedicated to each individual occupant. When you are proposing higher density, it is generally a more sustainable form of development. It provides for a variety of housing forms, which is in line with our OCP policies, provides for compact site planning and smart design, as well as extension of sanitary servicing infrastructure, which again is a key component of the OCP policies to have that fully serviced community. The pedestrian connectivity to existing green space for not only nearby residents, but as well as those at the hospital and the senior citizens complex is a key component that staff have worked with the developer to embed as part of this proposal. Again, in line with specifically the Arrow Heights neighborhood policies, this CD zone allows us to have restrictions on vacation rentals, so those would not be permitted as part of this development. And then lastly, and very, very critically, the infill of this parcel and proposed development form is not only consistent with the applicable policies of the OCP, but it provides that much needed middle market housing form that the city's housing needs and demands assessment has indicated is lacking within the city right now. So it does provide that market option for that middle market. So that does conclude the staff presentation. I do want to note in terms of the recommendation that is in the council agenda package, item 4A as shown on the screen here. Oh, sorry about that. Item 4A is amended ever so slightly. It originally in your package has a reference to March 9th, 2021, and that has just been updated as shown on the screen here to be April 27th, 2021, to be reflective of today's council date. Thank you. This concludes the presentation, and myself and Ms. Wade are here should you have any questions for development services. I also do believe Mr. Black is on the line as well, should there be any more technical questions from the engineering side.
Great. Thank you for the presentation, Mr. Simon. Okay, Council, we've got four bylaws to be read here, or four motions. So can we get the first one on the table, and then we can have a discussion on this item number 1. Someone want to move that? Councillor Brooks Hill.
The official community plan amendment bylaw number 2286 be read a first and second time.
Is there a seconder for that motion, please? Councillor Charlotte. Council, any discussion on the motion? This is definitely amending everything so that we can put this whole process into the community. I will ask the question. All those in favor? Sorry, Councillor Palmer, I'm sorry I didn't see your hand up. My apologies. Let's go back.
Thank you, Mayor Sulz. I'll let Councillor Elliott go first.
All right, Councillor Elliott, sorry, go ahead, please.
One of the things that was mentioned was the survey for the neighborhood. What I didn't see that highlighted in the package that we received. Is that what was the consensus?
Mr. Simon?
Through your worship, it is identified in the agenda package and council's report there as attachment number 2. And again, it was with the engagement that was undertaken, there was concerns expressed from the community about environmental impact, which was in part the reason why City's Development Services Group did secure the services of Cascade Environmental to help with third-party review. And again, it was a common theme from the area residents that they were supportive predominantly. Can't remember the numbers off the top of my head. I think it was about 90% support for single family residential as opposed to multifamily for that remainder lot that is before council today. And while staff do understand the desire from some community members to want to retain single family housing as the predominant development form, As outlined in the presentation and is made abundantly clear in the city's housing needs and demands assessment, we do need to look at higher density options on our parcels that can accommodate it. And in this particular circumstance, with servicing being extended, with pedestrian connectivity being provided for, and with having a housing form that staff feel is contiguous with the development form in the area, the seniors complex across the street, as noted in the staff report, does have, I believe, 44 units there. So it is comparable with what we have here. And again, it is providing that middle market that is currently lacking within our housing continuum.
Comment, Councillor?
Yes, phase one, are they expected to be on the market anytime soon?
Through your worship, staff are currently working with the applicant. Subdivision is an applicant-driven process, so it's essentially as quickly as the applicant can satisfy those conditions. There are some components of that subdivision, and I don't want to delve too deep into that because, again, we are focused on phase two today, but there are some minor components of that subdivision application that will be addressed through this phase two process as well.
Yeah. I just worry that, you know, we're adding to the densification to the second phase, and we haven't even understood what the implications of phase one might be. And it just might get some resistance from the community.
Through your worship, one comment I would make for council, because this is multi-family development and as noted in the staff report, this does fall within a multi-family development permit area. The sequencing of approvals that need to go through for this development to ultimately come to fruition, we have the rezoning and OCP amendment today. There would be a subsequent subdivision application to actually create the phase two lots that would have to go through staff. And then there would also be subsequent development permit applications to guide the form and character. And all those items would need to be addressed, and that development permit would come back to council as per our delegation bylaw prior to any building permits being issued on the land. So it is a bit of a process for them to go to. It is multi-layered, and there are multiple approvals that would be required. And you know, the main focus today when we're looking at an OCP rezoning application is looking at the use and the density that's proposed and whether or not that is appropriate for this area.
Councillor Palmer.
Thank you, Mayor Sulz. I have a few questions, and I think I'll have some comments. Thank you, Mr. Simons. Articulate this. Your reports are articulated well, and you present it very, very well. You have a much better radio voice than I do. Thank you for that. First of all, Mayor Sulz, I just want to recognize, and I don't know the details of this, but I understand that there's been a kind of a monumental legal case with the Sinex people. I believe that through the courts that we are now on the traditional territory of the no longer extinct Sinex people. And so I just note that's a little thing in the report because you do talk about other First Nations there, but I think that's something that we need to, the city, both council and staff need to wrap our minds around the protocol around that, but I think that's an important item. The question I have is phase one, is that zoned R1 currently?
Through your worship, yes, that's
okay, thank so I guess I'm a little bit conflicted on this because I'm very much in favor of higher density, creating more infill development. So all those kind of principles that the planner talked about, I think are really, really important. And yet there seems to be a mix from the single family in the surrounding area. I'm going to just discount the hospital for a moment, but there's that, it's a single family residential area traditionally. And then we had the phase one, which sort of continued on that theme, maybe slightly higher density. And now sort of in the middle there, we're putting this higher density mixed use. And so, and I guess one of the questions I have, so it went through APC just this past week. And so that's come to us quite quickly compared to some of the other zoning applications that we've had. Was there some urgency, or how long's the application actually been in? When did they apply for the CD zoning?
Through your worship, the application came in, I believe it was June or July of 2020. And there has been significant work between staff and the applicant, alluding to one of the questions you guys had earlier about the work it takes to do a CD zone and to get everything in final form. It is substantial staff time to go back and forth to get to kind of cross all the T's and dot all the I's, get everything so that it can actually be implemented. So this application has been ongoing for approximately 9 months, and on April 20th, 2021, it was presented to the Advisory Planning Commission. Again, there was no rush to bring it there. It was our first APC meeting of the year, so we wanted to make sure that applications that were currently in the queue were presented to APC, and it was important for us to note APC's comments for council today.
And Mayor Sulz, I guess further to to going to CD zoning, and again, I think I follow Mr. Simon's sort of rationale for the CD. Although I have a sort of a question, because it's not comprehensive development in the sense that there's mixed commercial use and that kind of thing that you would traditionally see in CD zones in other cities. We have quite a mix match, I think, of things happening, including the recent fourplex. I think that was a CD zone as well. But I wonder if it's, really, should this be a rezoning? And I know you've done a lot of work, so don't. Anyway, I know you've done a lot of work, but I just sort of wonder if this should have been rezoning to multifamily. And I did pick up on the point that, okay, well, the current, if we went to R3, that it wouldn't fit what they aspire to do on the property. But maybe we should be re-looking at our zoning so that we have this sort of more uniform zoning rather than going to kind of really big city CD zones for a relatively small parcel. So that's some of the questions in my mind, and because it does start to transition the whole greater area there, and I'm trying to sort of balance those two aspects.
Through your worship, and I know Ms. Wade will want to add on to this. The question of looking at our higher density, our R3 and our 4 zones that are currently contained within the zoning bylaw is something that staff would be looking at as part of a comprehensive review, being a separate project, because we don't want to go and start tinkering with those zones without understanding the greater impact that it will have on existing R4 properties to suit one proposal in particular. So for the time being, the situation that does fall on staff is that a CD zone is one of the only ways that we can go about implementing some of the policies and provisions of the OCP through zoning regulations. But most definitely, I think staff would be on the same page with Councillor Palmer. We would prefer to have a standard zone in the zoning bylaw to guide developments of this nature, but it will take some work to make sure there's no unintended consequences associated with that, and it's work that staff's currently underway on. So Ms. Wade may have further to add, though I see that she has her hand up.
Ms. Wade, you have your hand up. You're muted. Your microphone is up.
I'm not used to having it up. Through your worship to Council Palmer, a couple of things I'd like to highlight. One is that we totally acknowledge that our zones need to be amended, and we are coming forward with a zoning bylaw update for you in May, as we've talked about before, to deal with some of the main issues that we know are affecting our current zoning, so that we can try to avoid some downzoning, because that's not going to help us get to the housing supply that we need to fill the need in the community. This area has been outlined in the OCP in the Arrow Heights Neighborhood Plan as an area that was to have higher density in it in the discussions to support the employment centers of the hospital as well as the senior center. So this has been talked about as having a higher density, which has been the conversations that we've been having ongoing for over a year when the first phase of the subdivision came in. So this has been a long-going discussion with the applicant and trying to fulfill a housing need in the community that we are very aware of, and that this CD zone allows us to do many things we cannot currently do in the R zone. It is a very, I would say, it's not a big one like from an urban center like Vancouver or anything. This is very much tailored to Revelstoke and our needs and the housing type, so that we can provide a mix and a range of duplexes, row housing, and fourplexes, and allowing some flexibility in those developments as they roll forward. So I think that what we're trying to lay out is that if we wait to make a bunch of changes, then we're missing opportunities to fulfill and create housing supply we desperately need.
So thank you, Mayor Sulz. So yeah, and I think Mr. Simons articulated. I think it's that question of the chicken and egg, and I appreciate that. Just looking at, so the motion on the table right now is on the OCP specifically, and not on the zoning aspects. So I'm just taking another look at the OCP. Mr. Simons, can you just tell us one more time in lay terms, specifically on the OCP, why an OCP amendment is made? And the reason why I'm picking up on that is through the director was talking about that the OCP actually envisions this kind of use. So I'm just want to pick up the detail just so I understand.
For sure, through your worship. So the OCP land use, so every single property within the city contains a land use. That land use is a high-level strategy that would guide any rezoning application. So some of them might be for commercial, some of them might be for low-density residential, high-density residential, and the land use of this particular property is identified as future growth. So future growth says this is supported for infill development until such a time, and that development should be undertaken once a neighborhood plan is prepared or a comprehensive development proposal is provided to the city. So in order for the rezoning to actually occur to allow for smaller lot sizes, we need a land use in the OCP that would support that. Hence why we have the OCP amendment application before council today.
And so, Mayor Sulz, then that T4, that T stands for transect, is that correct?
Through your worship, yes, that is correct.
Yeah, okay, and are those transect zones are under review by the department as well, or?
Through your worship, yes, that is correct. On February 11th or March 11th, when staff had presented our OCP initial round of amendments to Committee of the Whole, we were looking at dealing with the transect zones at that time.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Sulz. I think that's sufficient for now. Yeah.
All right, thank you. Any further comments on the OCP amendment bylaw? Seeing none, I'll now ask the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you. Moving on, if someone want to put number 2 on the zoning amendment bylaw, someone want to make that motion, please? Okay, councilors, I will make up. Go ahead, Councilor Charlotte.
Sorry, I got another meeting going on in my office right now. The zoning amendment bylaw number 2287 be read a first and second time.
Is there a seconder for that motion, please? Councilor Brooks Hill. Discussion on the zoning amendment bylaw. Any discussion, councilors? Councilor Elliott.
So we're just taking it from R1 to CD zone.
Mr.
Right?
Simon.
To your worship, that is correct. And I do want to reiterate for council, this is for a portion of the subject lands as they are not currently subdivided, and it would be for that phase 2 portion of the lands.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions or comments on item number 2, the zoning bylaw? Councilor Palmer. You're muted, Councilor.
Thank you, Mayor Sulz. I am conflicted with this, and it's because I don't really have a sense of the community in that the area. I know there's some consultation that went, and if I'm hearing this correctly, that they were generally opposed to the higher density. And yet we have to consider the greater needs of the community. I am conflicted because I just don't feel that I have a good sense of it. However, I'll make my decision as we go along here, I guess.
Councillor Elliott?
Yes, I guess associated with this motion is the next one, which says there's a public hearing. So the neighborhood would get their chance to offer feedback to council.
That's correct. That's correct. All right.
If that helps you, Tim.
Okay. Any further comments on the zoning amendment bylaw? Early on in this project, I had a conversation with the proponent and suggested that this part or a portion of this land would be perfect for higher density, and at that point there was some discussion, and he said if that's okay, then they would go with it. So anyway, that was my conversation with them very early on before we ever got this far along. So any further conversation on zoning amendment bylaw? Seeing none, I'll ask the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Seeing none opposed, this is unanimous. Thank you, Council. Moving on to item number 3, public hearing. Someone want to put that motion on the table for me, please? Councillor Palmer.
That the public hearing for bylaw number 2286 and bylaw number 2287 be scheduled in accordance with Section 465 of the Local Government Act.
Seconder for the motion, please. Councillor Elliott. Any discussion on the public hearing? Seeing none, I'll ask the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Brooksville, you're in favor? Yes. Okay. Councillor Palmer, you're in favor?
Yes.
Sorry. Just a delay for me seeing everybody. So that's unanimous. Thank you. Moving on to item number 4. Someone want to put that on the table for us, please?
Your Worship,
Palmer.
if
Yes.
I may, not the motion, it just, this aspect of the Cynics people, because we're naming a number of First Nations there, and I'm just sort of flagging that. I'm not sure what to do with it. It's a recent court case, but I think it is possibly going to be binding on how we proceed with these kind of consultations in the futures. So that's on 4A. I don't know if there's any comments from staff on how to deal with that.
Do we know, staff, do we know if any of these bands are members of the Sinites people? I know that we have, I'll get to you in a moment, Ms. Wade, I know that we have four bands that this is a traditional area, and definitely Sinites is one of them. So Ms. Wade, any comment?
Yes, Your Worship. We're happy to look into this, and if there was a friendly amendment to this, we can make sure that we have covered that, because I would agree with Councillor Palmer. With the recent court case, we have to ensure that all First Nations that are engaged properly.
Okay, so Councillor Charlotte.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm just, as a comment too, I don't know that I've seen all of the different bands mentioned like this before in one of our motions. Typically, it's just the nations, the four nations that you spoke of, where this is specifically getting into some of the bands, the ones that I am familiar with that we have started opening up relationships with. So it may be worth a separate motion or something else to look at which bands are we including, do we, as we name them more specifically versus the more vague talking about the nations, because I also don't see, I'm trying to remember if any of these are from the Tanaha. I believe they're all Secwepemc.
Yeah, I believe you're right. So do we want to just do a friendly amendment and name the four nations and then look to the particular bands as to which nation they belong to? Is that something that council would be conducive to? Councillor Palmer, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Your Worship. Is it can we delay this motion? Because it may be problematic. And just a technicality, it doesn't need to, there's no motion on the table yet. So, but is there any way, and I guess that's to staff, is can we hold off on this particular motion until next meeting, or is that going to be problematic for moving ahead?
Mr. Simon, Ms. Wade, any comment?
Through your worship to Mr. Palmer. Yes, I think that a friendly amendment would probably be the best, just to make sure that we've included, this is a standard requirement that we need to do when we're dealing with official community plans. And if council is more comfortable naming the 4 nations, then we're happy to do that. And we could just do a quick amendment to this to keep it moving. I don't know if Mr. Simon wants to add something.
Yeah, through your
Mr.
worship,
Simon.
Through your worship, I was just doing a quick double check of the LGA provisions in there. And at first glance, for this particular resolution, there is not a reference at what stage of the process it needs to be done at. But for resolution number 5, and I know we're not on that one is more specific, where it mentions after first reading.
Okay. Councilor Palmer.
So your worship, so on the basis of that, I would suggest that the 4th motion be brought back at the next meeting. We can make a motion to that effect if it's not time critical. And what's important for me as a councillor is this resolution. The council has considered what persons, and I don't think I've adequately considered so if we can hold off on this one until next meeting, that would be certainly my preference.
Okay. Mr. Simon, comment, and then I'll go to you, Councillor Elliott.
Through your worship, I don't have any comment on that. I would defer to Ms. Wade as well, see if she has any comment on that, but I think it's something that staff can definitely look further into because we are aware of the recent court cases as well. Okay.
Councillor Elliott, you have further comment?
More a question, your worship. Is this going to be a standard procedure going forward? I mean, it's a new one first time I've seen it. So once we amend the OCP, it then goes to the various nations or bands involved, and they review and then yay or nay it, and then it comes back to us?
I think we see this on a regular basis within the CSRD, and quite often there's no comment coming back, and so we just push forward. And so we need to be aware of that. Councillor Palmer and then Councillor Charlotte.
So Mayor Sulz, there's no motion on the table right now, so I'll do put the motion for number 5 on the table. That pursuant to, so, and that's, I'm just passing number 4, so that pursuant to section 477(3 of the Local Government Act, official community plan bylaw number 2286 is consistent with the City of Revelstoke financial plan and solid waste management plan.
Okay, seconder for that motion. Councillor Ryan. Any further discussion on that motion? Seeing none, all in favor? Okay, so go back to number 4. We'll just, do we want to add the 4 nations and then let you look after that, or just hold off till next time? So Ms. Lowe.
Through your worship, it's fine if number 4 comes back. We'll review it. Staff will review and ensure that we're making sure that we're consulting the proper bands and nations, and we'll bring it back for council.
Okay, so we don't need any motion for that?
Not on the table,
okay.
So it's fine.
Councillor Palmer, you have a comment?
Yeah, just for as a housekeeping item, I'll put a motion that that number 4 be referred back to staff for further investigation.
All right, seconder for that motion. Councillor Elliott, all in favor? Motion's carried. It'll go back to staff. Thank you. Okay, so we're moving on. That's all that we have for that Willie-Jim Holdings. Is that correct, Mr. Simon? Mr. Elliott, you have your hand up again. Do you have a comment?
No, Gary, I guess I had asked a question whether this is going to be standard procedure going forward. I don't think I got a response on that, so I'm not
Okay,
sure
sorry.
where we are.
I'm not sure if we know that, but I'll go to Mr. Simon or Ms. Wade. Ms. Wade, you have your hand up.
Yeah, through your worship. Yeah, it is standard practice, and this has come before you before. We just didn't name all the nations fully out, but this is a standard protocol, and when dealing with an OCP amendment, and we standardly refer to the nations as well during our referral process when we do bylaws and OCP amendments and zoning bylaws and development permits. So we do consult on a regular basis. And this is a standard clause right out of the LGA to be included. And we did do this for Hay Road as well.
All right, thank you.
And the lawsuit that Tim has mentioned, is that a different issue?
Yes, it's a different issue. It was about status, which they have won in the court. And so that's something that we do need to consider in moving forward.
Great, thank you.
The Sinites people have now got their status back as far as the federal government's concerned. So, thank you for that. Okay, we're going to move on to Development Services Zoning Amendment Bylaw 2290. Following that, I'm going to take a short break so that we can just use the facilities. So let's go on to item C. We have a presentation. Carry on, Mr. Simon.
Thank you, Your Worship. This item is a zoning bylaw text amendment to add the use animal clinic minor to the Victoria Road Commercial District, being the C6 zone. So staff's recommendation is that zoning amendment bylaw number 2290 be read a first and second time, and staff also do deem this to be consistent with the official community plan and are recommending that council waive the public hearing, which is in line with public health recommendations. So getting into some further details, again, really high level overview of the background of the proposal details, conclude with the staff evaluation and recommendation. So this particular application isn't with respect to any one property, but rather all properties that are zoned C6. So it's not a site-specific application. It is an overall zoning bylaw text amendment to the entire C6 zone. So the current veterinary clinic is in a location that is zone C6, just to note, and it would be brought into compliance with this. And the intent of the C6 zone is to allow for high quality developments within a scenic corridor area that does experience a high volume of traffic. So again, the application seeks to allow animal clinic minor in the C6 zone. Staff have reviewed there are 41 properties based on our GIS information that are zoned C6 in varying states of development. These properties are predominantly located within the Farwell and Mountain View neighborhood, as well as a couple properties you can see on the outskirts here that are located within the Central Business District's neighborhood. So staff have reviewed the application and are supportive of the zoning bylaw text amendment. It's consistent with the economic policies of the OCP, which do include provisions to seek greater flexibility in zoning bylaw allowable uses to have flexibility to support business activities. The C6 zone itself already includes a multitude of comparable uses that staff do deem as compatible to an animal clinic. So cafes, car washes, retail stores, amusement and recreation services. The idea is that each one of these uses may have the potential to generate 24/7 traffic, the same way that a vet clinic that's open 24/7 could, and it would be kind of a comparable operation. And staff don't foresee any impacts associated with the animal clinic operation with respect to noise and traffic that are beyond what would currently be permitted in the C6 zone. Therefore, as shown on the screen, staff are supportive of the zoning bylaw text amendment and hence are recommending it be read a first and second time. And again, staff are also supportive of waiving the public hearing because staff have determined that this application is in alignment with the current provisions of the official community plan. Thank you. This concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Simon. Appreciate that. So can we get the first motion, zoning amendment bylaw, be read a first and second time? Councillor Elliott, put that on, please.
That zoning amendment bylaw number 2290 be read a first and second time.
Seconder for the motion, please. Councillor Charlotte. Any discussion on this zoning amendment bylaw? Seeing none, I'm going to ask the question. All those in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. Moving on to item number 2, public hearing. Someone want to put that on the table, please? Councillor Elliott.
That a public hearing for bylaw 2290 be waived in accordance with section 464 or sub 2 at the Local Government Act of the Local Government Act.
And
that notice be issued to waive the public hearing as section 467 of the Local Government Act.
Seconder for the motion, please. Councillor Charlotte, any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you. Council, we're just going to take a couple-minute break, just a bio break. If I can ask you just to put your mics on mute, and then we'll rejoin in a moment. Thank you. Okay, we have all of council back, so we'll re-engage. So item D is a staff report, finance, long-term financial plan, public consultation report. So if we could have someone move this, and then we can have a bit of a discussion on it. So someone want to make the motion that's on in your package, please. Councillor Brooks-Hill.
That Councillor Palmer be appointed to the.
No, you're too far along. We need back one page, finance, just back on page 2, which is just.
Yeah, I see. Sorry.
Then we'll go on to that.
I can do that one too.
Awesome.
That the city's 2021 to 2035 financial plan and 2021 tax rates bylaws be prepared for council's consideration based on the 2021 to 2035 long-term financial plan approved by council at the February 23rd, 2021 regular council meeting.
There's seconder for the motion, please. Councillor Sherlett. Any discussion on the motion? Councillor Palmer.
Question.
Yes, Councillor Palmer, and then Councillor Ryan.
Thank you, Mayor Sulz. So just a statement. I am opposed to the plan, but I'm in favor of this motion of the consultation.
Great.
Thank you, Mayor Sulz.
Thank you. Councillor Ryan.
Yeah, I was wondering if Ms. McCabe could comment on that donation box and if there'd been any traction on that front.
Ms. McCabe.
Through your worship, I can. We have been inquiring with the vendor that we do our property tax notices through, and we are working on some other changes as well at that time. If that is something that council would like to be added to the property tax notices, this would be a good time to get a resolution to that effect. That would be wonderful.
Cool. Is there anybody else on council who's interested in doing that? I think it would be probably most useful if there was like a little, it was accompanied by a little blurb that mentioned what that money would be used for and why we're adding that option for those that are seeing those tax bills go up. I don't know if anybody would use it, but a lot of major cities have this option on theirs. So curious to hear anybody's thoughts.
Okay. Do you want to elaborate on how you feel, Councillor Ryan, just to remind all of us what your intention was, and then the public will know as well?
Yeah, the intent was just to provide an option for anybody who has the means to contribute more than their tax bill, and something along the lines that would say, you know, because of aging infrastructure and the need to put money aside for making sure that we can fix our roads and do all that stuff, we need to see these taxes go up, but we recognize that there's people on fixed incomes and those who struggle to pay this. And so if you're willing to contribute an extra however much, that would be really helpful in helping alleviate some of those costs in the long term. I don't know, somebody would probably word it better than that, but something to that effect. And I don't know that anybody, I mean, I don't think a lot of people are going to jump at it, but it would be interesting to see who does. And if it's just a small change to make on the tax bill, then I think it's worth exploring, because once it's on there, we can probably put some effort into how we word it and see what that looks like and where that money gets applied, whether it be like towards art, or maybe it is towards those infrastructures, or maybe we are able to set up some kind of fund that takes the pressure off those who really need it and help pay for some of their taxes. So I'm not really sure what the uses could be, but it would be interesting to see if people are willing to contribute.
Okay. So Ms. Lowe, with the motion that's on the table, do we need to alter anything regarding that so that we could possibly include that, or is that something that can be done and then it'll come to council in the future plan?
So through your worship, it could be done both ways, but I wouldn't alter the resolution that's on the table right now.
Yep.
And you do need to vote on that. I would put forward another resolution separate from this one altogether.
Okay.
So should we vote on this and then I would bring forward that other motion?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Any further comment on the motion that's on the table? Seeing none, I'll ask the question. All those in favor of the motion that's on the table? Opposed? Councillor Elliott, you're in favor? Yes, okay. That's unanimous. Thank you. Okay, so Councillor Rind, would you like to make another motion now for Ms. McCabe to add in the future regarding the
Yeah,
donations?
sure. And we can just discuss and see if anybody else thinks it's worth exploring. Originally, just before I put that on, the concept was, I was thinking about how some people who move to town have more than they necessarily need. And I know in some places they're able to collect money from tourists in some capacity and then help apply that to affordable housing. And I just think what we do with the money is less important and more like, are people willing to even contribute at this point to see where it goes? Could be an interesting thing to explore.
Okay.
So that's where I was going with that.
Okay.
So I would make the motion to add that donation box onto the tax bill this year, if anybody else wants to second it.
Okay, is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor Brooks Hill. Any further discussion, councillors? Councillor Elliott, you have a question or a comment?
Yes, Your Worship. I'm wondering whether this is an opportunity to pick some projects that you might be able to contribute to. Are there things that you, Jackie, are that maybe the food bank, maybe whatever, some recreational trail? Is it something that you can contribute extra towards? And maybe that's a better way to generate extra funding.
Yeah, you're right. It's probably better to have some kind of purpose behind it instead of just like donate to whatever. I just don't want to be the one to make that decision because it doesn't seem like, you know, the best use of all the brains here. But yeah, I think we could, if anybody has any suggestions, maybe we could have a few that we try, or we use one this year and then we try a different one the following year. You know what I mean?
Sure. Ms. Lowe.
Through your worship, I would suggest that maybe Ms. McCabe bring back some options for council to look at, just because I'm not sure legally what we're allowed to do. So I would want to make sure that all that was covered and in just a brief report. So if the resolution could include that Ms. McCabe brings forward a report with options with respect to a donation box on the property taxes, I think that would probably be better. Then you'd have more information to make a decision with.
Perfect. Then I would put that motion forward basically exactly as you worded it.
Councillor Brooks Hill, you're okay with that amendment? Yep. Councillor Elliott, you had your hand up.
We mentioned the food bank as one option. I think the Recreation Bicycle Club might be another one. I can think of a series, but the Art Society as well could use some funding. Street art, those type of things could be on the list of Tanya, if Tanya's creating one.
Okay, so maybe Ms. McCabe could come up with some ideas, and if you, as councillors, have some particular ideas, if you could let Ms. McCabe know, and she could weigh them and see if they're legal and if we can do that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So I'll just, if you're okay, I'll ask the question, and then Ms. McCabe can come back with a report. Are you okay with that, Councillor Rind? Or you have further comment?
I was just gonna add that, you know, those vouchers that we give for people who are on lower incomes who are able to use them towards transportation, things like that, that we already support, like programs like that would then alleviate some of the pressure from infrastructure. Like, do you know what I'm saying? Like,
sure. There's
ways that we could maybe apply it that we're already doing, like great programs that we're already doing, but as long as we can sort of frame it in that, like, this is helping the most marginalized groups, I think that's probably the best intent for the money, if that's legal. But yeah, that's all.
Sure. Okay. All those in favor? Motion's carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Rind. All right, let's move on now. Councillor Brooks Hill, if you would like to go on with the appointments, you could mention that.
All right. That Councillor Palmer be appointed to the following: Tourism Initiative Committee, Revelstoke Accommodation Association, and Revelstoke Chamber of Commerce.
Okay, is there a seconder for that motion, please? Councillor Charlotte. Any discussion on that? These were discussed with Councillor Palmer, and he feels these kind of fit his wants. So just any further comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. Moving on to UBCM grant application. This is a development application process. So someone want to put this motion on the table, please? Councillor Charlotte.
Sure, that an application to the 2021 UBCM Development Application Program and willingness to provide overall grant management to continue to improve and streamline the development application process be supported.
Is there a seconder for the motion, please? Councillor Brooks-Hill. Any discussion on the motion? Councillor Elliott.
Can you explain to me, sorry, Your Worship,
Yes.
I'm trying to understand what this means. Is this just sounds like a just a nothing thing? I'm not sure.
Is there, Ms. Wade, are you still on? Will you want to weigh in on this UBCM grant application?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Yes, this is a great opportunity that just came up over the last, I'd say, 5 weeks. And this is a great opportunity for us to leverage money that we have put aside for things like software purchase and also filling in the gaps that we did not have any budgets for, like software implementation support and training. So we've put together a table of a number of things that we need to do, and we're going to leverage the money that we have. And then on page 3 of the report, there's a table that outlines the activities and the money we have in the budget and how we can ask for $350,000 to support our endeavors to streamline. This will also include a third-party review of the development processes so that we can find any more efficiencies within the department as far as applications and processing. We will do that as well. So those are the highlights. It'll also help us with some money to update the subdivision and servicing bylaws and help us with providing brochures and other materials that we require as well.
Great, thank you for that. Any further comment, Councillor Elliott?
Yeah, I guess I just I thought we were on a move toward efficiency in our development services, but if there's more money available, I guess I just have trouble spending money for the sake of spending it. Maybe I'm wrong. It's just a philosophy that I have a tough time with.
All right, thank you. Councillor Charlotte.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm excited to see this come through. I think it aligns well with our own priorities and wanting to really streamline our processes and give better service. I'm looking at this and seeing it as an opportunity to do more than we were planning on doing, so do it better. And especially with that third-party review, I think we've all been looking at this for so long, we're stuck in the weeds almost. So to have that third-party review to come in and hopefully help be able to find those extra efficiencies and do our work better. I think this will be really good for us. And it, like Ms. Wade said, this aligns very well with our existing goals, just adds a little bit more funding and backing to it to do it better.
Thank you for that. Any other comments, councillors? Seeing none, I will ask a question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you. Moving on to item 11C, COVID restart funds. Does someone want to put that motion on the table for us, please? Councillor Brooks-Hill.
The transfer of the COVID-19 Safe Restart grant to the Financial Stabilization Reserve Fund in 2020 be approved.
Seconder for the motion, please. Councillor Elliott, any discussion on the motion? Councillor Rind?
Yeah, so we haven't really talked much about this money, and I'd like to talk about it more because it's very broad in how we're able to use it, or at least that's my understanding. And so I don't see that the way that we've laid it out, at least to me, it doesn't seem like the best use of the money, but I'm curious what other councillors have to say about that.
Any comment, Ms. McCabe, on how we're using the money at this point? In the report, we're talking about the PPE and the portable toilets and that sort of thing. Do you want to make comment on that? And then we can go around the table.
Yeah, through your worship. The first motion is actually just to move the money into the reserve so that we have it to be used for 2020 and future years. So I think the next one where we're moving it out again might be a better place to speak to that, if that's okay. And the reason for that is if we don't put it in the reserve to begin with, it ends up being all revenue in 2020, and then we actually don't have it available to spend in future years. So if we could do it that way, that would be maybe more conducive to conversation and discussion. Is that okay?
Yes. Councillor Palmer, you have just unmuted yourself. Did you have something you'd like to say before we call a question?
I think the Director of Finance's comments are very prudent. So if we can just amend that to be just the first part, a friendly amendment if nobody's in opposition.
Yep. Okay. And that's what it states in there, is just to move it. So all those in favor?
Wait, I'm confused. What?
Okay. We're going back to number 1, that the transfer of the money. We need to transfer the money to the Financial Stabilization Reserve Fund.
It was broken out. Yeah.
Yep. Okay. All those in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. Okay. Someone want to put item number 2 on, and then we can discuss it further. Councillor Brooks Hill.
The transfer of 334,188.
There's an extra 8 in there.
88 from the Financial Stabilization Reserve Fund in 2021.
No, 2020.
2020?
Yep.
That was
okay.
I'll start again. The transfer of $334,188 from the Financial Stabilization Reserve Fund in 2020 to cover the additional expenses related to the COVID-19 pandemic incurred in that year be approved.
All right. Seconder for that motion, please. Councillor Sherlett. Now discussion on the motion. So going back to any comments first, McKay, before I go back to Councillor Rind and some of her questions.
I think I can speak to those, Your Worship, if that's okay.
Yes.
So in 2020, with the pandemic hit, the city did incur quite a few expenditures. Many of them were unexpected, so a lot of the IT and the extra PPE consumables, and those things had to be spent, and so we did the one-time expenditures as well, which was things like sneeze guards and that kind of thing. Those were unavoidable expenses, and so by using this reserve fund, this is what the province intended it to be used for, was to cover these kind of unexpected costs. There was also some additional ones. So the council had originally approved the use of council budget, basically, to do the recovery task force, and then we were going to fund the Revy masks, and then we had some portable toilets from the public as well. And so using these funds, all of these expenditures were related directly to COVID, and that's why the recommendation is to cover the 2020 expenditures out of this reserve fund. For 2021, these are just suggestions and projections. They're not set in stone at this point. And so, yes, there can definitely be some discussion with council about how they'd like to spend the money going forward into 2021. And we can discuss at a later date. I can break back more detail about what is behind some of these numbers. I know that the recovery task force is still ongoing. There is some discussion about doing the Revy masks again. That's up for discussion. I know we have put the portable toilets out at Woodenhead Park again this year, so that probably is an expenditure that we would need to do. The Flex Firefighter was discussed previously as well with council, as well as the additional bylaw enforcement. So yeah, so there's definitely some room for input into what this, some of these uses of funds for sure. And if there's additional things that council would like to do with these funds that fit within the criteria, there is, as you can see, even using what I've projected, there is still some money left at the end that can be used for whatever, whatever council thinks would be good use for the funds within the criteria outlined. So
Thank you. Are you okay with that, Councillor Ryan? We'll talk about this down the road as to what we do in 2021 with some of these funds. And this motion now is just to deal with the stuff that we've already paid for in 2020. You're muted.
I'm fine with that piece, but I think it's important that we have that conversation. So I would probably make a motion to schedule that conversation, because I think there's so many organizations that have been impacted, and the food bank being one of them. And where we see this money helping with that is really important. And I don't think we should put that off much longer.
Definitely.
Okay. All right. Councillor Palmer and Councillor Elliott, you have your hands up. So Councillor Palmer.
Councillor Elliott was before me.
Okay. Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm just wonder whether, I mean, it seems like those are defensive, or I think everybody's got to expend significantly to adapt to the COVID situation. But what I'm wondering whether we could use some of this money to progress out of it, like to amplify, to create jobs, to find ways to recover economically from the impact of this, rather than just be defensive and just recover our past cash outlay.
Okay, and that's part of having that discussion is what can we do to help recover as we move forward. So, sorry,
Gary, are the funds eligible to be? Are we eligible to do that with those funds?
Ms. McCabe.
The outline, sorry, through your worship, in the letter we got is that, yes, so the funds are identified, eligible costs identified include things like addressing revenue shortfalls, so that might be in, say, parks and recreation departments, covering the cost for facility reopening and operating costs, which is a lot of what last year's costs were on, emergency planning and response costs, so that would be the bylaw enforcement's responses. And there's also bylaw enforcement and protective services, so like fire protection and police. So with COVID and things, there are some extra requirements in those departments. Obviously, also for the computer and electronic technology is specifically identified. And that is not just within the organization. So as you all know, we've had to do a lot to implement the abilities for everyone to attend virtual meetings. But it's also outside of it, so to improve interconnectivity for the community as well. And then also it does allow for services for vulnerable persons. And so they've, examples they've provided are persons living with disabilities, mental illness or addictions, experiencing homelessness or other vulnerabilities, and then other related costs to COVID. So there's definitely some latitude for how these funds could be used moving forward. I think it's prudent to use the funds to cover what we spent in 2020, but definitely there's still, like I said, there's still quite a bit there to move forward.
Great. So I'll just let you all just touch on this a bit, because we do need to move along and we do need to discuss this as a group for 2021. Councillor Elliott, you have another comment before we move on?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. It's great that this fund is available for that. It seems like there's $1.7 million left, but the expenditure you just mentioned, again, are more defensive or recovery. We're getting our expenditures back rather than progressive. And that's my concern. I would be looking for the progressive side of things.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Palmer.
Thank you, Mayor Sulz. So just for clarity, the motion on the table is dealing only with the 2020 expenditures, and we'll have that conversation later on those other items. So just a question on the 2020 is, so these are essentially expenditures that I've already done, so there's really not a whole lot of choice in passing this. And so there is a little question about accountability and timing. I know it was a very exceptional year, but I think for the 2021, we need to have better clarity on the authority of expenditures. But if I'm understanding this is money already spent, so we have no choice. It's gun to the head.
Right, you're correct. All right, Councillor Ryan, you have another comment?
Yeah, I do. I have a question about the 530 that's slotted in there for 2021 and under IT hardware. What is those for?
Through your worship, that would be for bringing in the ability to have virtual meetings within the council chambers so that we could do live streaming basically and a little bit more high tech, so people don't have to actually physically be in council chambers. Once we're allowed to open up again to council chambers to attend the meetings, they'll be able to, kind of like what was done with the public hearing when we did it in COVID, and people could call in and those kind of things. That's what it's to do, to set it up. We're looking at potentially 3 different locations. If you want more information on that, definitely I can get Jeff to bring back a report, or IT to bring back a report on what that would entail.
But those expenses haven't already been spent, have they?
No. No.
Okay, yeah, that seems like a crazy amount. Like, anybody with my phone can do that.
Yes, those were based on quotes. That dollar amount's actually based on quotes that were received when we first started looking into this potential and opportunity back in the fall.
Okay, yeah, that's crazy. But I do have one other comment. I think if there's any, I know we have to vote on this, and that seems like Councillor Palmer was saying that money's already spent, so may as well. But I would like to refer this discussion first before we have a discussion as council. I'd be very interested in hearing what the Social Development Committee has to say, because I think this is the perfect thing for them to weigh in on, seeing as they deal with the most vulnerable groups in our community. It'd be great to get their feedback on how they feel about this money and the best way to approach the people who have been most affected.
Okay. Good.
So Mayor Sulz, I'll call the question
after.
and I'll support the motion of Jackie after we get this one passed.
Yes,
Great.
I am calling the question now. All those in favor? Motion's carried. And then Councillor Palmer is going to second Councillor Ryan having a discussion in the future as to how we.
That's not my motion. My motion is to refer it first to Social Development Committee and then to meet as a council and discuss.
All right. Good. Thank you for that clarification. So we'll go to social development and then bring it back to council. Any further discussion on that motion? All those in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. Ms. Lowe, you were going to say something and I cut you off. Okay, we're going to move on. Thank you. Correspondence, item A, resolution in support of provincial trail strategy for UBCM. Someone will make that motion, please. Councillor Rind, seconded by Councillor Elliott. Any discussion on that? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. Wildsite protection of old growth forest and critical habitat. That letter came not only to council, but also came to RCFC.
Your worship,
Sorry
to interrupt. Through the chair, I believe Councillor Brooks Hill has a comment.
Okay, sorry, Councillor Brooks Hill, please. I forgot. Yes, sorry. I looked down and your hand went up.
I need to recuse myself from this discussion as I do business with RCFC. So I'm going to leave the meeting.
So as I was going to say, this letter here has come to both the council and RCFC. The manager of RCFC, Mr. Copperthwaite, has written a letter that will be going out or has gone out to Wildsite, explaining how RCFC does things, and very good letter, and spells out how they do things, so that really what they're doing is probably the best thing when it comes to forest practices for this area. And so I'm appreciative of that. And I think that we should let RCFC respond. And I know that some of you sit on that board, but the letter will come to the board, and or already has. And you can make further comment, or if you have questions, you can ask at this point. Councillor Palmer, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Mayor Sulz. Is that letter is already written or is in process of being written?
It has been written. I do not know if it has been sent.
And will council get a copy of that when it's sent?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yep. Councillor Elliott, you have a question, you have your hand up.
So the RCFC is under the mandate of the city of Revelstoke, correct?
Yeah, the city of Revelstoke owns RCFC, yes.
So when the RCFC is responding on, they're reflecting the councillor's position? Is that what you're?
No, they were just
suggesting?
stating facts. They were just stating facts on how RCFC has operated to date from its inception.
Okay, so was the wild site message sent to the council or was it to the RCFC?
I believe it was to both.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I just wondered if council should have some input on what's said.
well, council does through the RCFC board. So the letter was sent out to the RCFC board for input, and some of you sit on that board, and you would have seen that letter. So and it made comment to Mr. Copperthwaite before it goes out.
Yeah. Maybe, I just wonder whether it should go out before the rest of the councillors see it. I mean, if we're reflecting, I mean, there's 3 of us on the board, that's fine. But I wonder if the other councillors might like some input.
Okay, I can see if it's already been sent out. If it hasn't been sent out, then you can get a copy of it prior to sent out, and you can give input via email. It wasn't based, his report or his comment wasn't based on what council has inputted. It was basically stating this is what RCFC's mandate is. This is what they've done since inception to date, and this is how they run their business. That's basically what it was. Councillor Palmer, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Mayor Sulz. So just for clarity, I believe RCFC is an arm's length corporation. So the sole shareholder is the city of Revelstoke, but as under the Corporations Act, then it as an arm's length body, it makes independent decisions, and so we don't have a direct say other than council representation on that board, I believe. However, I think there is a bigger policy question because we are also representing all citizens in Revelstoke as the holder, representing the shareholder, which is the city of Revelstoke. So I think it does warrant a bigger discussion, but it is also appropriate for RCFC to be making those independent, that board making independent decisions without direct interference. But yeah, there's a bigger question there for sure.
Okay, good. So I will talk to RCFC and make sure a copy of the letter gets sent to all of council. And I'm not sure whether the letter's gone out yet or not. It was still being debated around the RCFC table. So we'll get to that. Any further comment on that letter? Okay, I'm going to move on to Revelstoke Paddle Sport Association, protection of the Jordan River West Side Road. So that letter has come in, and we know that we have that we've had staff put in a section 17 for that area. And so Ms. Wade, are you still here? Do you want to weigh in on comments?
Through your worship, yes, staff has submitted our section 17 application. We had a meeting with the province as well early this week, just to see where the status is, and they're processing it. This particular one referenced here, I believe, is the Currup Road one, which is actually in the CSRD. It too also has a temporary license. So it is going through the same process as the other one that we have just on the east side of the Jordan River.
Okay. So section 17 going on that as well, or an application for such, correct?
Not for the lands in the CSRD because it's out of our jurisdiction, but on the lands that go from the section 16 boundary to our city boundary between the CSRD. That will have a section 17 on it. Yes.
All right, good. Councillor Palmer, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Mayor Sulz. So the Section 17 application, could we have that circulated to council, just so we're aware of what's going on? And then the other comment that I make, so I think that's correct. The planner pointed out this is the pit that was the same application as the Jordan River one that's within our municipal boundary. And I think they are actively extracting gravel out of there at this point, I believe, but no, you don't think so? Okay, fair enough.
Okay. Any further comments, councillors, on the letter? Councillor Charlotte.
So if the letter's directly addressing property that is in, or a piece of land that's in the CSRD, would it be worthwhile to respond and direct that inquiry to the CSRD? You sit on that board. I'm not sure if there's any appetite there to do some similar work to what we're doing to protect the area.
Yeah, I definitely will bring that up at the next meeting, but I will make inroads with the CSRD CAO and their planning department ahead of time and ask them and explain to them what we've done here so that they're aware and they can do appropriate action, or at least bring it forward to the board for that sort of thing.
I think that would be great. I mean, it would be a shame if we did all this work to protect within our boundaries and then just outside that didn't continue on. So this is an opportunity to work with our partners on this.
Absolutely. Fully agree. Thank you for that comment. Any further comments? Ms. Wade, your hand's still up. You have a further comment?
Yes, to your worship. I just wanted to note that, yes, we are working planning staff to planning staff with the CSRD. And in our previous report, we reached out and worked together with that. And we are also in conversation with the ongoing activities with both the Jordan River and, gravel extraction, et cetera. So we are working very closely with them. So I just wanted to let council know that.
Great. All right. Thank you for that. Appreciate that. Seeing no other comments, we're going to move on to communications. Stormwater Management Plan conditional grant approval. So we have an additional $10,000 grant for the Stormwater Management Plan, which now gives us a total of $30,000 in that Stormwater Management Plan. I don't know if Mr. Black is on that needs to or wants to talk about that at all, or Ms. Lowe, if you want to weigh in at all.
Through your worship.
Thank you, Mr. Black.
Sorry for the delay there. We're very pleased to obviously get any sort of funding from the province to support our future planning activities and understanding of how we're going to manage stormwater in the community. And so thank you. And this, again, supports our efforts in master planning, liquid waste management plan, sanitary, storm. They all tie together in how we manage a runoff in the city. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Black. Any further comments from councillors? Seeing none, I'm going to move on to CED, Economic Development Commission minutes of the 14th of April. I sit on that board. Good response from community. They're definitely wanting some economic recovery or assisting in economic recovery. They've got some great minds on that, but also along with the task force, they're looking for more ways to assist in economic recovery. So they're engaging in our civic partners to see what we can do and what the task force can do to assist others moving forward. So as Councillor Elliott has mentioned earlier, definitely ways we need to start looking for ways for economic recovery to spur the economy on and how we do that sort of thing. Appropriate that they're looking at that at this point in time. Any further comments from councillors? Seeing none, I'm going to ask Ms. Floyd, do we have any questions from the press?
No, we haven't received any, Your Worship.
All right, thank you. So I'm going to ask that we go in camera pursuant to section 90.1A and E of the community charter. Does somebody want to make that motion for me, please? Councillor Brooks Hill, seconded by Councillor Charlotte. All in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. We're going to take a couple-minute break and then we will reconvene in camera. Thank you.